When I get out of that fire stairwell, that's where I experienced the worst 30, 40 seconds of my life. You see the smoke, the fire, paper, furniture, people being pulled out of the other building. Hurts the same today as it did then. Never goes away.
Joe, thank you so much for coming to New York to film today. How does it feel to be back in the city?
Freaky. The train pulled into Newark. I had like this almost out-of-body reaction to this because that's how I got to New York on the day of September 11th. I came in on the Amtrak, got off at Newark, took the PATH train into the Trade Center. And so it was reliving that without actually reliving it. And you could feel it. My body just sensed it, and it was a freaky feeling, and I wasn't expecting that. So every time I come back to New York, there's always something that rekindles the ugly and the bad. You can't help it. And it's not the city's fault. It just happens to be where all this happened for me.
What was life like for you before the events of 9/11?
Yeah, I'm ending a 47-year career in the insurance industry. And at that time, I was basically at the peak and the prime of my career. Busy raising a family of 4 children, supporting the household by being progressive and aggressive in the job that I had, and trying to move my way up the ultimate ladder of success financially and professionally. Life was good. I had already had a grandson when this had happened because my oldest daughter had a child when she was very young. So I was a grandfather of 1, a father of 4 kids between the ages of like 19 and 14. And as hectic as you can imagine, that lifestyle could be, sports and dancing school and all this other stuff that they had to do, plus the schooling. And at one point in time, I worked away from where we lived, and they loved when I would come home on the weekends because I would bring pizza when I would come in on Friday. And I always said, the way to my kid's heart is through pizza. So it's the things we did. The trade centers, especially, were basically a mecca for the insurance industry, so it wasn't unusual to be called to a meeting there. And at the time, the job that I was in on the day that this occurred was I was a senior vice president for CNA Insurance Company in downtown Chicago. So with that type of role, it was pretty commonplace that you would come here to meet with some of the folks that wanted to talk to us about the possibilities of insurance. So I didn't want to go to this meeting. I did everything in my power to not come to New York to go to this meeting, because on that Monday, I had a chance to go to another type of insurance meeting that involves aluminum or titanium sticks about this long, little metal heads, little white balls in the grass. I had a chance to go on a boondoggle golfing in southern New Jersey. But we planned it through and we thought about it, and I eventually was able to accommodate the folks that wanted me to be there on Tuesday, and that's the plan, and that's exactly what I did. I walked into 2 World Trade Center, the South Tower. The security guy gives me one of these, right? Go over to the security desk, and both buildings were identical, 110 stories high. We were going up in the South Tower to 105, which at that time was the highest occupied level of the building. 106 was a observation deck, 110 was an observation deck. So we were going on these elevators up to 105, which was the highest occupied level of the building at that time. We were escorted into an internal conference room where the meeting was going to occur. And it was truly internal, 4 walls, no windows, 1 door. And so insurance meetings never start on time, never have, never will. 8:30 was supposed to be the commencement of the meeting, and at 8:30, kind of came and went, people drinking their Starbucks, people talking about kids and soccer and the NFL, whatever, anything but insurance. And at 8:42, the lights flickered. Just this electronic flicker of lights. We couldn't see anything. We didn't feel anything. We didn't hear anything. Just this flicker of lights. And almost immediately, a gentleman by the name of Rick Blood from the corporation we were visiting came into the meeting room and he said, "Hey, there's been an explosion in the North Tower. We got to evacuate." 54 intelligent human beings, all in the same room, all at the same time, all type A personalities. We all did the same thing. "We've come from far and wide, Rick. You know, this is New York. Stuff happens." It wasn't the word we used, but I'll be nice, okay? And stuff happens. We just want to have our meeting. Rick did his job. He got everybody out of that room, all 54 of us. And I know everybody got out because I was the last guy out. And he escorted us all over to the nearest fire stairwell and told us that we were now going to walk down 105 flights of steps. Oh yeah, what a bunch of happy campers, right? I mean, it was kind of interesting. Everybody did the same exact thing. They all reached to their left or their right hip or into their pockets. They were going to pull out their cell phone because we were going to call somebody to moan and groan about the fact that we couldn't have our meeting. You've got to understand, we had no clue what was going on. Not a clue. You, your parents, those that were around that day that were watching this on TV knew way more what was going on outside and inside those buildings than any of us that were right there. We had no clue. We flip up our phones. We're going to call somebody to moan and groan about this, and no service. No service. The main cell tower for all of southern Manhattan was on top of the North Tower, the first building to be struck. So cell service was gone. When we got into that fire stairwell, there are signs to the left or to the right of the doors at each level that say, "Hey, if you're in here, don't leave this fire stairwell except at the lobby level." And we're at 105 and we start to make our way down. We get down to the 90th floor. The 90th floor, the fire stairwell door is propped open. And everybody in our fire stairwell is bailing out, going onto the 90th floor. And I can tell you that when I get out of that fire stairwell, that's where I experienced the worst 30, 40 seconds of my life. You look out the windows to the north and you see these huge, gaping black holes through the sides of that building. Gray and black billows of smoke pouring out of those holes. Flames redder than any red I had ever seen before in my life, just licking up the side of the building and beyond the top level. And the smoke just black and gray and billowing out of there. And you look through this. It was a crystal clear day in New York that day. The weather couldn't have been more magnificent. But I remember looking through that smoke, through that fire, through those black holes, and seeing pieces of the fuselage of a large plane lodged inside the other building. And I kept thinking to myself, my God, how did that pilot not see the building? How did he miss? He didn't miss. He didn't miss. And you see all of this. You see the smoke, the fire, paper, furniture, people being pulled out of the other building. An unbelievably gruesome, awesome sight. And I had that feeling that all of us have had at some times in our life. That pit of your stomach. I want my mommy feeling. I just wanted to go home. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to go home. There were people on that 90th floor that day with me that seemed to be frozen, whether they were frozen in fear, mesmerized by what they saw, screaming at the top of their lungs, and yet seemingly not able to move on. I said, I'm getting out of here. I am not staying here. And I turned to go back to the fire stairwell and get out of this. All this was about 30 to 40 seconds. It wasn't all that long that it took me to make this decision. And when I turned around, there was a guy right behind me who was in the same meeting as I was. His name was LADbible. He worked for the Zurich Insurance Company. Huge human being. Big, tall guy, football guy, okay? All-American football player at University of Pittsburgh. And when I turned around to quickly go back, I almost knocked him over with my stubby little body because I was in such a hurry. And he put his big, giant hands on my shoulders. He said, "What are you going to do, man?" I said, "I'm getting the hell out of here." I said, I can't stay here. What are you going to do?" He said, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But before I go, I'm going to go." And he pointed to the closest restroom. Yeah, that 2.5, 3-minute delay in his departure cost him his life that day. I got to the top of the fire stairwell, and they're making an announcement over the PA system. The event's been contained to the North Tower. We believe the South Tower is safe. We suggest that if you work in the South Tower, you return to your workstation. If you feel you need to leave, please proceed with caution. If you're a visitor, please proceed with caution. And I know a lot of people think, how could they make that type of announcement? But it made sense. There was a person in charge of the building security. You know they're down at the lobby level, and at this point in the event, there's a cop on one side, there's a firefighter on the other side, and they're looking back at this woman or man and saying, "You've got maybe 25,000 people in this building. We can't let them out because it's raining concrete, steel, and bodies outside. What are you going to do?" And I'm sure this person thought to themselves, well, our building's okay. The elevators are still going up and down, the electricity, the ventilation system. Let's everybody stay put until we can figure out what's going on. So it did make a lot of sense for them to say that, to say, hey, stay where you are. Let's figure this out. Who would have thought that within 18 minutes, the same exact thing would happen to our building? Who would have thought? We got to the 78th floor. 78th floor in that building, as well as the 44th floor in that building, were known as sky lobbies. Second and third lobbies in the buildings because they couldn't let the elevators go all the way up straight, 110, okay? So the 78th floor sky lobby was just that, another lobby. And when we got to that 78th floor, the woman that was running our meeting is screaming back at me. She wants me to go to the elevator with her. And finally, some of my good common sense took over, and I thought, no, building, state of duress, fire. It wasn't our building at that point, but stay in the stairwell, Joe. And I looked at Mary, and I kind of politely waved at her and continued my way down the stairwell rather than getting off onto that 78th floor. Arguably, the best decision I've made in what is still my life. We were between floors 74 and 72 when the second plane plowed through our building. And the plane went through our building between floors 77 and 82. We were just a few stories below that strike zone. Never felt anything like that. This fire stairwell, this concrete bunker that we're inside starts to shake so violently back and forth at angles it shouldn't be shaking. The concrete spidering out, the handrails breaking away from the walls, the steps undulating underneath our feet like waves in the ocean. We feel this heat ball blowing by us. We smell this jet fuel, and this thing's just rocking back and forth and back and forth and back. It felt like forever. And you would think there would be this massive pandemonium. There was nothing in that stairwell at that point but just this stunned silence. Everybody was going in the same direction. We were all heading down. The 35th floor is where we encountered for the first time the police, the firefighters, paramedics from New York City and the Port Authority. Just the looks in their eyes told the whole story. No words, just the looks in their eyes. They knew. They knew that they were going up those steps to try to fight a fire that they couldn't beat. They knew that they were going up those steps to try to save lives that they probably could not save. And they knew that they were going up, and they knew that they were never coming back. You know, I've been telling this story for 24 years, right? And I promise myself every time I get to this part of the story, I'm not going to cry. Hurts the same today as it did then. Never goes away. But it's what drives me to tell the story. Story of people who were willing to lay down their lives to save that of others. It's what they promised to do, to protect, to serve, to save. I just don't know how they can be, how they were, that brave and strong and heroic. And I love each and every one of them for doing what they did, because if it wasn't for them, all of us that survived that day wouldn't be here. The 18th floor going down, we also encountered a guy who was actually on the 15th floor, but we could hear him on 18 because he had an electronic bullhorn, megaphone. And this guy, who was a security guy, was singing through this megaphone. And he's singing, "God Bless America," and he doesn't even know all the words, okay? Well, there was a reason for that, but it's okay. He's singing, and he's really bad. I mean, he had a voice only a mother could love on payday. And he's singing out loud, but he was doing something that he was probably asked to do. Get up there, calm these people down, make them laugh a little. He had to know with this bad singing, he was making people laugh, and get them out of the building. I always compared it to like the musicians on the deck of the Titanic, right? Go up there, play music, keep them calm, get them off the boat. This is what this guy was doing. He happened to be the guy that was in charge of security for Morgan Stanley in the North Tower. He had evacuated all his floors. He came over to the South Tower. He asked the firefighters if he could help. They told him to do exactly what I had just suggested. And I wonder how many lives that man saved that day while giving up his own. He never got out. He never got out. When we got down to the lobby level and out of the fire stairwell, you're looking through these arching glass windows. You're looking to your left, to your right. You're seeing crumbled concrete, twisted steel, red blotches on the ground, and you knew what these red markings were on the ground. They couldn't let us out at the ground level because it was raining concrete, steel, and bodies. They escorted us down into the concourse level of the Trade Center complex. And that's the first time we had the chance to encounter people who were in real need, gaping wounds, missing limbs, real blood and gut stuff. And human nature makes you want to reach out, makes you want to try to help. And you could not that day. And the reason you couldn't that day was because there were so many cops, firefighters, paramedics there to aid and assist these people. I've never seen at one place in time such an outpouring of caring and concern and of love. And that's what this was this day. This was this outpouring of love. The escalators that took you up to the ground level, no longer escalating. They were steps at this point, back, forth, in what they call switchback fashion, right? To get to the street level. I'm about halfway up, and I hear my name, Joe, Joe, Joe. I turn around, I look back, I see my friend, David Duffy, calling me. When we got up to the ground level, they're bobcat bulldozing everything away, parting the seas of all this that was going on so that we could escape. Every uniform yelling at us, run, 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 don't stop. You get across the street, you're in front of St. Paul's Chapel, you can't help yourself, you stop, you turn around, you look at this unbelievable sight, this ticker tape of concrete and steel and bodies. And David looked at me and he said, what are you going to do, man? I said, I have no clue, David. I came up on a train. I wanted to go back on the train, get back to Philly, take the rental car that I had in Philly, drive it back to the Philly airport, fly back to Chicago where I live. This was my plan. And I said, I don't think that's going to happen. And he said, I think you're right. That's probably not going to happen. Why don't you come with me to my place? I said, okay, great. Sounds like a plan. Where do you live? Upper West Side, 111th Street. I went, whoa. It's a long way away. And he said, you got a better plan? I said, no, I don't. You're right. I don't have a better plan. I'll go with you. We'll figure out what in the name of goodness is going on. And we started making our way to the north. We were only 8 minutes north of Two World Trade Center, of the complex, the building we had been just in. We came across a commercial laundry. The doors were thrown wide open. The all-news radio station blaring out that this was an on-purpose terrorist attack. But it was the next couple of sounds that are the sounds that I hear and anybody that was there hear every day. First thing in the morning, last thing at night. Unmistakable sound of the twisting steel, the crumbling concrete coming to the ground. And even more hauntingly, the sound of tens of thousands of people on the streets of New York all screaming the same blood-curdling scream all at the same time. We were very fortunate that David had a friend of his in the Tribeca section of the city where we were at that time. When we got into Meredith's flat, she had other people that had kind of taken flight from the event in her place. And her husband, ironically, stuck in Chicago, which is where I wanted to go. So we sat and we watched and we sat and we watched. About 5 hours into the event, the mayor, Giuliani, got on the TV. It was kind of amazing. He was the right guy at the right time for that circumstance. He looked through the lens of the television and he basically said, New York, this has been a tough day. We're going to get through this. We're going to survive. We're going to recover. And I know all of you just want to get home. If you've seen the pictures, you see the pictures of people walking across the George Washington Bridge into New Jersey, out the Long Island Railroad, on the tracks themselves to get out to Long Island. People just wanted to get home, and he knew that. And he emphasized it again. He said, again, I know you just want to get home. We believe we've got enough confidence in our uniforms and our security that we've built up, and we're going to reopen the subways. Reopen the subways, my God, what a ballsy thing to do. What a decision to make. And David looked at me and I looked at him and he said, come on, we're going. And I said, where are we going? And we got about 2 stops up, which was 32nd Street, Penn Station. The way I got here today, pretty eerie. And he looked at me and I looked at him. He knew I wanted to get out of New York no matter what it took. Without saying a word, we both got out of that subway car, got into Penn Station, looked like a couple of tourists, not knowing where we're going. And we're walking through this crowded train station, and there's this woman from Amtrak, and in her finest New York accent, she waves her finger at me. She said, where are you going, honey? And I said, I want to get to Philadelphia. And she says, great, there's a train down here about to take off. And I reached into my suit coat pocket. I had a round trip ticket, okay? She looked at me and she said, are you kidding me? We're not collecting tickets today. Some things never change in New York, okay? I think that woman's still there at Penn Station, and she would yell at me today, too. But you get down on that train. You come out of the tunnel underneath the Hudson River. You get back on the Jersey side. You look back at what once was the greatest skyline in all the world, now relegated to a gray and black cloud. How sad. Really sad. And you're on this train for about 80 minutes, and there are people sitting and standing, crowded, and not a word was spoken. There were no words to say. 14-hour trip back to Aurora, Illinois, the western suburb of where I lived at that time. Did it in 12 and a half hours. Don't tell the cops. I just wanted to get home. I just wanted to get home. Calling people left and right on my cell phone. Calling my wife all the time. And I was about 10, 15 minutes away from home. And I called her for the umpteenth time, whatever it was, you know. And I said, I'm almost there, 10, 15 minutes away. And she went, okay. And I said, hesitation. Something happening. And she said, well, yeah, they decided to have a mass at Our Lady. And I stopped her right before she finished her whole sentence, right where I was, and said, you know what? It's a good day to go to church. I'll meet you there. I was more afraid the day before, or the minute I opened the back doors to that church, seeing these hundreds of pairs of eyes all staring back at me, knowing where I had been. Looked over to the right, to the pew where we always sit, Roman Catholics, we always sit in the same pew. And there's my wife, a couple of my kids, some of my friends. I wish my wife was here. She's prettier than me. She's nicer than me. You would love her, and she's a talkative human being, but she's not demonstrative. She would never do any of this. This would not be her. That's what made it doubly amazing when I looked over to the right to see her jump over the back of that pew, run to the back of the church, give me the greatest hug and a kiss a man could ever want. It was at that moment that I knew that I was home. I was home. There were 54 of us in that meeting. 7 of us survived. 47 perished that day. Almost all of them have yet to be identified. They're still working on identification at the World Trade Center, the mausoleum that's at the memorial and the museum. And they have any of the littlest bit of DNA that they can to try to continue to bring some people home. And I hope that they can do that someday for some of my friends that were lost that day. It's tough. The woman that ran our meeting, who was calling me at the Sky Lobby level, nobody that went to the Sky Lobby made it out. When the plane went through the building, the elevator cables were just cut. Those elevators went straight to the ground. Nobody survived. And she left behind a husband and 2 boys who are grown men now. And that's just one person who lived her life so strongly. She was a woman who was at the top of the insurance game at a time when this wasn't happening. She had broken through the glass ceiling and to see her life taken in that way, so sad, I didn't think to ask her to come with me. Guess I should have. Her boys would have a mom. Her husband would have a spouse. But as a survivor, you can't live that. Because if you do, you won't survive. I've had 2 nightmares since this all occurred. Mary was in both of them. And in both of those dreams, Mary was standing at the end of my bed and saying, "It's all right, Joe. It's okay, Joe." And I got to keep telling the story.
I'll never forget, the underboss was a towering individual with some, like intimidating features, where he just stared at you and go, "All right, tell me, who are you? Where are you from?" And as I'm staring at him, I'm trying to focus on his eyes, and I'm looking past him, and there's a bloody apron from a butcher. There's a meat cleaver, a bone saw, a fillet knife, and I have 5 recorders on me.